Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Tuesday, August 17th. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. It was back to school today for thousands of children in area school districts, and with the pandemic still raging, there are safety guidelines that some schools are challenging. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman says one East County district is rescinding a policy that's been drawing criticism.
Ramona Unified board members are reversing course for now, putting on hold a recently adopted policy that would allow parents to opt their children out of mask wearing despite state guidelines requiring it. During a special board meeting Monday night, parents spoke on both sides of the issue.
As board members, it's not your job to do what's popular. It's your foundational responsibility to ensure the safety of Ramona students at our schools. Following health guidance is the right thing to do for Ramona.
I'm simply begging for the freedom to choose. What I think is best for my children may not be best for yours.
I'm here because I want to make the choice with whether or not my daughter wears a mask, and I don't think it's your right.
In a statement to KPBS, Ramona Unified School District Superintendent Teresa Gray said the board went on to approve the Safe Reopening Plan, which follows state guidelines for K-12 schools. And per those guidelines, all students and adults will be required to wear face coverings inside when students return to the classroom on Thursday. The mask wearing requirement is in effect for students and school staff across California. Most recent guidelines say face coverings do not have to be worn outdoors, just inside when kids are present. Currently, those under 12 are not eligible for COVID-19 vaccinations.
Let us do our job. Even if you're not happy with how it's going down, we need to be able to do our work.
This masking issue is not over just yet in Ramona. One school board member tells me that the plan adopted has language specifying that a form for parents to opt their kids out of masks will be soon made available. Dawn Perfect says the district board and staff will work collaboratively to develop an opt-out form that is legally solid, meaning at the start of the school year, masks will be worn, but there is clear direction to make that optional sometime in the future. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
And keep your masks ready if you're planning to travel in the months ahead. The TSA is extending the federal mask mandate into the middle of January. And that means if you fly on a plane or ride a train, you'll need to keep your face covered regardless of your vaccination status. The mandate was scheduled to end next month. San Diego County is now collecting proof of vaccination from its 18,000 workers, and now another shot might be on the horizon. Camila Bernal has an update on vaccine boosters and when they might be available.
A COVID booster shot after 8 months. That appears to be the plan being developed by top health officials.
The data that the Biden administration is making these recommendations off of is still very preliminary, and these booster shots have not yet received FDA approval for anyone except for the immunosuppressed.
But the third shots for those vaccinated with Pfizer or Moderna could be administered beginning mid to late September, according to sources.
This is proactive, anticipating that more data is in the works, showing that it is both, that the vaccine's effectiveness seems to be waning a little bit over time, and that this Delta variant is worse.
And as vaccines remain in short supply in other parts of the world, others saying not so fast. The World Health Organization says the 2-dose mRNA vaccines provide long-lasting immunity and will not change its recommendation unless the science says otherwise.
All of the world's most vulnerable and those who are most at risk, health workers, need to receive their first and second doses before large proportions of the population, or all of the population in some countries, receive that third dose.
Doctors on the front lines say their urgent need is for more people to simply get their first shots.
This is so preventable at this point in the epidemic.
Camila Bernal, KPBS News.
The pandemic is still with us, but one thing that's long gone are the days of an easy commute. Traffic patterns feel like pre-pandemic gridlock at times. Coming up, we'll look at what's driving the trend on our roads. One of the NFL's biggest brands is the latest to require fans prove that they are vaccinated. Today, the Las Vegas Raiders announced it will require guests to use a mobile app that contains their vaccination status, and that will allow them to enjoy the game without having to wear a mask. The brand new Allegiant Stadium is an indoor venue and will welcome crowds for the first time this season. The policy goes into effect for the season opener. The Raiders are the first NFL team to announce such a policy. And the Padres are reaching out again to give away a pair of free tickets and a Padres Hero t-shirt to get people vaccinated. An event will be held on Tuesday, August 24th at Petco Park. This video is from earlier this year when the stadium was used as a vaccine center. The first 150 people who get vaccinated at Gallagher Square will receive the tickets and t-shirt to see the Angels play on September 8th. We're seeing fewer chaotic scenes out of Afghanistan today, but that does not mean the situation is not tense. San Diego Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs talked to CNN about the withdrawal and gave her reasons for why this is happening.
You can't teach values or democracy at the barrel of a gun. You can't use violence to try and promote ideals. It just doesn't work. And so from the beginning, from the get-go, the mission was flawed, and so this is a failure of the George W. Bush administration. This is a failure of every administration since. And I think another thing that's important to say is that most of what we're seeing right now is because of the deal that President Trump made with the Taliban, wherein our allies on the ground knew that there was a concrete date that we were going to leave. And so they did what they needed to do to keep themselves safe. And that's, I think, why we're seeing such a quick collapse of the Afghan National Defense Force.
The White House says it's in contact with Taliban leaders who agree to allow safe passage for civilians who want to leave the country. A Pentagon spokesperson says there have been no hostile actions by the Taliban and that members of the now defeated Afghan army are helping with evacuations at the Kabul airport. The U.S. military is expected to finish its evacuations by the end of the month. The U.S. has a history of welcoming refugees from countries where it's gone to war. Afghans have resettled in the U.S. since this war began, but what happens now that so many are trying to leave? Britt Conway has this report.
In the city of Kabul, Taliban fighters are victorious, smiling. At the city's airport, scenes of fear and desperation to get out. People who helped U.S. troops and diplomats in Afghanistan are terrified they'll be targeted by the Taliban, skeptical of their assurances that people who worked with foreign forces and their families won't be harmed.
Taliban are the people that they never keep their promise.
The U.S. says it will keep its promise. President Joe Biden has directed the Secretary of State to use up to $500 million from the Emergency Refugee and Migration Assistance Fund. And people who work for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services have been asked to help out, possibly deploying to Texas, Wisconsin, or California, where U.S. officials say they're making space for around 22,000 people who applied for an Afghan Special Immigrant Visa, or SIV.
Persons that come to these locations will have been pre-screened by the Department of Homeland Security to enter on condition of full immigration processing once they arrive.
But national security officials say there are as many as 60,000 Afghans who could qualify for refugee or SIV status, and that doesn't include their families.
These are moms and dads with little kids at their knees, and every one of them should be gotten out by us.
I'm Britt Conway reporting.
After a long 5-year wait, the murder trial of a man accused of killing a San Diego police officer is getting started. Jonathan de Guzman was killed back in July of 2016. He and another gang officer were working in South Crest when they were shot. The other officer survived. Opening statements began today in the case against Jesse Gomez, who is charged with murder. De Guzman was a 16-year veteran of the department. Climate change brought a top White House advisor to Del Mar today to see an example of our changing environment up close. As Eric Anderson reports, she got an earful from those who want the Biden administration to move faster.
Gina McCarthy gathered with local officials near the seaside train tracks that run through Del Mar. Bluff erosion there has local officials scrambling to shore up the cliffs as they consider plans to move the tracks inland. That served as the backdrop for McCarthy to tout the Biden administration's respect for science and a commitment to fight for the environment.
Every decision has to think about climate and equity as a fundamental consideration. And you have a president who came in and on the first day, he didn't just rejoin Paris, but he set goals that we have to keep.
McCarthy promised aggressive action to deliver the president's promises to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. She says solar power was the big winner in the energy marketplace last year, and that momentum for renewable power needs to keep building. But that wasn't enough for a small group of protesters who demanded an end to all fossil fuel burning.
Stop issuing permits for drilling and other oil and gas related projects, particularly on public federal lands.
While the arguments may only be apart by a couple of degrees, one thing that is not in dispute is that the climate is warming, and it will impact areas like this in Del Mar. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
From now through December, the coast in La Jolla turns into a leopard shark playground. KPBS reporter Melissa May explains why these sharks make their way to our backyard every year.
If you wade out into the water along La Jolla shores, you may be lucky enough to spot a leopard shark.
You know, honestly, it's actually really sick just to see some wildlife out here in La Jolla, you know.
Casey White is a beach supervisor for the kayak tour company Everyday California. He says people have all kinds of reactions when they see sharks.
Oh, you know, people are freaked out by the sharks sometimes, you know, but then other people are fascinated by them. They're really friendly sharks, you know, so we definitely tell them that. But for the most part, people are just really excited to see them.
Right now, hundreds of pregnant leopard sharks are close to the beach thanks to an offshore submarine canyon. It makes waves in the area very small and the water warmer, and at night provides copious amounts of squid to feed on.
They are basically incubating their developing embryos, kind of like mother birds sitting on their eggs to keep them warm.
Andrew Nosal is an environmental and ocean sciences professor at the University of San Diego. He has studied sharks since 2007 and says the sharks won't hurt you.
We need to be respectful of their space. It's a real privilege that we have these sharks in our backyard and that we can share their company on their turf. And in fact, they're usually pretty skittish.
Escondido resident Eric Trogdon and his wife bring their stand-up paddleboards and snorkel gear to swim with the sharks.
It's amazing. At first, it's a little bit scary because they're sharks, but then you remind yourself, okay, they're docile. And when you're on the supboard, you're up high enough that you can look down and see through the water, and it's like the ground is just moving underneath you.
Nosal wants the public to know that this is a marine protected area, and although it may be tempting to reach out and touch the sharks, they're actually protected by law, which means you legally can't touch them. From the La Jolla shores, Melissa May, KPBS News.
You can add the Adams Avenue Street Fair to the growing list of events taking a step back amid the latest COVID-19 surge. Event organizers say they're making the tough decision to cancel. This would have been its 40th anniversary. The Adams Avenue Street Fair is a North Park tradition and was scheduled for the weekend of September 18th. In a statement, staff said several vendors decided not to participate due to the local surge in cases. Rush hour in San Diego County has been lighter since the COVID-19 pandemic hit. As KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen explains, it's making its way back, but not always in the ways that you might think.
Traffic on the freeways bottomed out in the spring of last year when stay-at-home orders were at their strictest. It's been creeping up ever since. But for Derek Thrasher, who's been working from home since March of 2020, rush hour isn't much of a concern anymore. The lack of a commute prompted him to move recently to a bigger home in Escondido that's further from his office.
Also in hopes that that when we would return to the office, that traffic would be a little less bad coming this direction, going north, but I've actually learned that that's not necessarily the case.
Overall, Thrasher says he drives a lot less nowadays, but he also finds himself taking more trips just to get out of the house.
After I've been working from home all day and I realize I actually haven't really gone anywhere for a while, I might go to the dog park, take the dogs somewhere around, just a quick jaunt. We actually have quite a few options around us. And then just little trips to the grocery store or downtown Escondido to have a bite to eat or a drink.
Thrasher's driving habits are playing out across the county. Remote working has led to a much lighter morning rush hour since fewer people are driving to work. But traffic doesn't ease up as much after that morning peak, and sometimes it's worse in the afternoons than before the pandemic. Remote workers may not be driving home from the office, but they are taking more trips unrelated to their jobs. That's according to cell phone location data analyzed by the company Streetlight Data.
There's a whole host of new driving that happens because people now have the flexibility to, go off and drop off a child at camp midday, or go, do a shopping trip that would have previously been impossible because you're in the office. So we believe that a lot of that midday driving has to do with errands and sort of casual driving. As opposed to commuting.
An increase in delivery services has also put more cars and trucks on the road compared to before the pandemic. Total driving is still down, and that's been enough to keep congestion in check. But as more businesses choose to bring their workers back to the office, traffic is likely to keep creeping back up. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Northern California's Dixie Fire has been in the news lately, but that's not the only fire forcing evacuations. The Caldor fire doubled in size over the past 24 hours. It's now at more than 6,000 acres. The fire started Saturday in El Dorado County between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe. Some buildings, including a post office, have been destroyed, according to local media reports. The entire region is dealing with hot and windy weather this week. The impact of climate change goes well beyond wildfires. Scientists say it's also posing an uncertain future for a major tourist destination. Heather Jansen explains the new concerns for Lake Tahoe.
Known for its serene skies and lovely lake views, the draw of Tahoe felt by tourists and locals alike.
It's just a spectacular place.
It's the water that leaves a lasting impression, but in recent years, battling low lake levels.
So sometimes the lake's really low and there's droughts. We've lived through that. Sometimes you get tons and tons of snow. So it's every few years, one way or the other.
UC Davis researchers say climate change is making its impact. Their most recent report looking at the lake says intense heat could make it more likely for the area to see more rain than the snow we're used to.
We've definitely been having warmer winters.
The study says because of that, streams may fill fast, snowpack would melt, and levels could rise by as much as 10 inches a day.
Meaning that we're going to get probably unprecedented flow rates in the stream.
UC Davis researcher Dr. Jeff Schladow says there's no time frame on when this could happen too.
As time goes by, the likelihood of it happening increases, but it could happen 6 months from now. And that's the frightening part.
And areas like Truckee could be one of the towns impacted.
A flood in Truckee, that would be biblical.
A battle of the elements and Mother Nature leaving her legacy on the lake.
That was Heather Jansen reporting. We can expect cooler weather here in San Diego over the next few days. Jessica Pash has the forecast.
Oral
looking at some changes ahead in the days to come, thanks to a dip in the jet stream that's mainly going to be impacting the northwestern tier of the nation. But even in Southern California, we're going to be talking about a little bit of a cooling trend here and a little bit of some moisture in some of the higher terrain and also some gusty winds. So as we look ahead to tonight, temperatures falling back down into the low 60s in Ramona, mid 70s towards Borrego Springs, 60s in Mount Laguna, 70 degrees in Chula Vista there for your overnight low tonight. The marine layer will certainly thicken back up here too. You'll notice the clouds and the low-hanging clouds and fog really sticking around for some of the coastal regions here through the early morning hours of Wednesday. After that, things should improve though as we move through the rest of the day. Big picture showing again that cooler air spreading in from the northwest. That's going to continue to spread further east, but here's that monsoon moisture. It's going to try to kind of wrap in here into southern portions of California on Wednesday, bring that possibility of a few showers and even a couple thunderstorms, mainly confined to the mountains and the higher terrain, and some of the deserts could also get in on a little bit of that moisture too. So temperature-wise, we're in the upper 70s in Oceanside. We're in the low 80s in El Cajon, low 80s out towards Ramona. Again, you can see some of that thunderstorm shower activity popping up here in the forecast. But Thursday, we get that dry air starting to push in out of the north, and so that's going to squash any kind of moisture that's with us here for Wednesday. You're not going to really notice much of a temperature change here near the coast over the next 5 days. Basically from Tuesday into Wednesday is the big change, but beyond that, temperatures are going to be generally in the mid to upper 70s here. Further inland, we're talking about low 80s and upper 70s in the forecast, a mix of sunshine and clouds, no rain here. In the mountains, a few storms possible there on Wednesday, but we'll get that cool down back down into the mid 60s by the time we get to this weekend. And in the deserts, it's a little bit cooler too. Storms possible Wednesday, and we stay below the triple digits through the next 5 days. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Jessica Pash.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, the fall of Afghanistan. Cementing their hold on power, the Taliban begin to describe their plans for the country. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Whether it's a table in the kitchen or a room of its own, for many people, the home office has seen a lot of activity in the last year. But what if that office space takes on a meaning and shape of its own, say an oval one? I recently met a La Jolla man who has dedicated his workspace to his passion for American history.
When Roger Dangel walks inside his house, he takes a step into another place and time.
Welcome to the Oval Office.
He's been collecting historical artifacts for more than 20 years. The room is now flanked by history-making documents signed by the most famous men in American history, the men that made a country.
I guess if you're going to have a theme room, you might as well have the biggest theme room you can have.
When Roger and his wife rebuilt what was once his parents' home, they designed this room to bear the famous oval shape, just like the real thing.
It's a functional desk, it's a functional office. I use it all the time.
And the size of the desk was also taken into consideration, a replica of the Resolute desk, originally a gift from Queen Victoria to then-President Rutherford B. Hayes and used by many American presidents.
The most famous one, of course, is John F. Kennedy with John, coming out of the little door in the front, and this one has that same door in the front that you could open up as well.
But beyond the wainscoting, scalloped doorway molds, and other small, thoughtful details, this room holds treasures that transcend time, like this Lieutenant Colonel's Union uniform worn during the Civil War, with a small handwritten clue as to the person who wore it.
This was found actually in the pocket, and it does say that it did belong to Elijah Hunt Rhodes of Rhode Island, and that's kind of cool. This is Alexander Hamilton's signature.
With a little taste of how they settled things back then.
And he was killed by the Vice President of the United States, which was Aaron Burr.
And there's a paper signed by William Henry Harrison, who served only 30 days as president before succumbing to pneumonia. And yes, even Donald Trump made the wall.
I'm kind of an equal opportunity presidential collector, as I have every president to date except for Joe Biden, which is so new right now that I don't have a presidential document from him because he's still in office.
While these unique items remind us of the important events in history that have shaped the country, some smaller pieces give us a glimpse of the personalities behind the decision makers of yesteryear.
Doodles. These are original sketches by Ronald Reagan when he was doodling as governor.
And while this original doodle sits casually on this desk in La Jolla, the Reagan Library sells copies for museum visitors.
That's just so small and so unique because nobody really has those. Do you see which way the head is pointed? The head is always pointed to the olive branches with the exception of one president. The eagle turned its head to the arrows during World War II from Franklin Delano Roosevelt after they attacked Pearl Harbor. And when Harry Truman became president, the eagle's head turned back over to the olive branches. And it's remained that way ever since.
As guardian of this treasure, Roger wants these things to be accessible and, more importantly, interactive.
This would contain your laudanum, which is opium.
He says history should be touched.
And this is something they won't let you do at the Smithsonian, but we do here. And that is an actual document signed twice by Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln signed it right here and right here. August 17th, 1863.
And less than 2 years later.
These glasses were reportedly found at Ford's Theater the night that Abraham Lincoln was shot and was dropped by a patron there, a captain. If these glasses could only talk, they could tell a story.
And it is the story behind the land deed, the pardon, the court-martial, or even the Civil War bullets lodged in a piece of wood that draws Roger to these items.
I'm just holding this piece of history in my hand for a short period of time until it can be passed on to someone else.
And for lovers of history, these are reminders of how far we have come and how far we have yet to go.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And by the way, if you're wondering, Roger Dangel's collection is a personal one, and it's unfortunately not open for public viewing. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Do you need a COVID-19 booster shot? Morning Edition will have an update on what looks like another round of vaccination efforts in the months ahead. And now that schools are reopening, what happens if a student gets COVID-19? Midday Edition updates us on the evolving quarantine process for classrooms. And as always, you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation. Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.